Hello, it's Miles. I had someone reach out to me regarding the color bass ID I posted in my last video. He asked if I could break down the drop because there's some cool stuff going on here, so I figured I'd make a video about it in case anyone else is curious. So, first thing, drums, pretty simple, nothing much going on. I've got my kick that I made. I could do a drum synthesis tutorial if people really need. And then a NASCO clap. And then there's a snare switch up halfway through with one of my own snares. And I've just got some transient shaping on it. And then in terms of hi-hats, everything's pretty simple. Just some simple NASCO rides and crashes and whatnot. But if we go to my sidechain group, there's some cool stuff going on here. Also, I apologize for any CPU glitches. So, I have this bus, and there's a lot of things going on here. I've got some distortion with some bias, an end power, disperser, pretty simple stuff there, and a NASCO spectral comp with just a little bit of upward spectral compression, some EQing to tame the low end and a little bit of harsh highs, a clipper, and then a utility because I forgot that the outgain of the clipper exists. And then I've got this volume knob rack that I made just so that I can control silence. And what's actually going on under the group is a bunch of pads. So if I solo each one, it's a Sharks pad, and I just went through and got some cool, interesting chops out of that. And then look at that, another Sharks pad. So in terms of processing, as you can hear, there's actually a filter table with the spectral notches, and I've got this slow LFO modulating the cutoff and the frame position of that filter table. So it's just giving it some interesting texture. And then the main melody that's coming out of this color bass stab is actually from this vocal. And without any effects, it sounds like this. I really like to use this processing chain of erosion before an overdrive, and then disperser OTT, a little bit of EQing, and Haas because I love stereo. Another element that gives us a lot of interesting texture is chopping up these little texture jams that I made, and that sounds like this. So I've got some spectral transient shaping, OTT, disperser, EQing, some delay that's really short, and ping pong to give it some interesting stereo, and obviously clipping. That is giving a lot of really cool texture to this gun. Simple saw sub that I made, nothing crazy. I really like this preset though. It's very clean. It's just a sine wave and a saw wave that's a little quieter, and the first harmonic is removed so I can control the volume of that subharmonic. And there's this noise, and both of these oscillators are having a little click of FM coming from this noise. It's subtle, but it's nice. And then I've got a lot of tube distortion, some upwards multiband compression, a notch filter, and an EQ taking out a tiny bit of sub and adding some high end. And then in post-processing, I've got this EQ that gets automated to give that cool little vowel movement. Some bass lane to control harmonics, some multipass. This is very important to this. Everything above 700 hertz is getting widened, and then a little bit of clipping, control the peaks, and sub pattern. Pretty standard, nothing crazy going on here. I also have this little transient layer. I was in a time where I was doing this on all my sounds, and if I remember correctly, yeah, this is just white noise with a bandpass filter being automated by an LFO, a little bit of spectral time, which is just delaying it across the frequency spectrum. Nowadays, I would use the new Sharks plugin Quantum Shift, but spectral time worked, and OTT, stereo widening, EQing, and then a clipper. And then in the second half, I have this going, which is really cool. I love these kinds of sounds. So you can throw pretty much anything into resampling it into Vital, and if you put random amps and have a little FM from noise, giving a little transient, adding a chorus, and a comb filter. Like, that sounds like random amps. But then this tuned comb filter with key track all the way up gives it tone, and then a little bit of distortion and compression. And another thing is that if you have 3 or more unison voices with a really low detune, and you go in this advanced tab, if you assign an LFO to the spectral spread and move this around, you can get some really cool, weird spectrally textures. In the melodic section, I've got these chops of the vocal. There's some important things I want to go over in the effects. So I've got this cool phase plant rack I got from my friend SO that's giving this cool texture on the downbeat. And this nice sustain, I'm pretty sure I stole from another friend a long time ago. I use this very frequently. And then obviously the finger vocal as a chant. And so this sound is very important to this drop. It is a sine wave. Simple. So if you get a sine wave, just an LFO, I usually have it on a very low note and have the LFO go all the way up on the transposition of this knob specifically, and then a little bit on the transposition in the master so it goes even higher. Cut the low frequencies and do a little bit of auto panning. That adds a lot to that little specific bit. Some really nice ear candy to contrast that. Lasers, and that's a laser I made. Same kind of methodology. So for the B section, which was the section that I posted on the TikTok, which sounds like this. Starts off with this really cool growl. It transitioned very nicely from this section, because this vocal leads into it. So this growl. It's pretty much my method for growls. It's also got this layer, which is a bounced version, I'm pretty sure. I just super over processed it. I know I use MAME a lot, and MAME is a free plugin. And you can just give it these really weird artifacts, especially on this blade setting. And there's also got a built-in frequency shifter. So layering that with the growl, this layer specifically is Haast, can give some really nice width. So this growl, without any of this processing, you also have to remember that this is being severely upwards compressed by this bus. Sounds kind of weird. There's also a separate sub for it, which is the same sub that I'm using for the rest of it. It's just a bottle low and a monster 5, and that monster 5 is getting a little bit of phase distortion from that. Obviously separate sub, tiny bit of white noise, but the big thing is the bandpass filter. It's getting a lot of filter movement. And then, honestly, in the effects, breaking it down one by one, you've got hyperdimension for some whip, a phaser for more valley movement, an all-pass filter, giving it some cool artifacts, a notch filter, love messing with notch filters, an EQ, and then a lot of overdrive distortion, as in the stack very high, but subtle drive, and then a little bit of disperser, and a ton of upward compression. And then a multipass, again, with a Haas above 400 Hertz, an OTT, some EQing. I have a little bit of N-Silk, which is kind of like a pseudo alternative, taming down this specific frequency range, a clipper, and a gate, just to avoid any ending artifacts. So that's how that growl is made. Again, I could also make a full growl tutorial because there's a lot of different methods I use to make growls. The actual sound in this section of the drop, what did you know, is just pad. And then I have this vocal tune to a 9th. Then obviously this, this really cool sharks sounding texture jam from earlier. And the whole jam of that sounds like this. Which is made with a sine wave arpeggio, really simple, a little bit of phaser movement, and then Sound Toys crystallizer. I just tweaked that until I got something that sounded like sharks. And then obviously with the sub, really cool sound here. Very inspired by Boba Whale, I'd say. So I love getting growls and glitches from other sample packs, resampling them into Vital with random amps. Same formula, especially with the unison and the spectral spread. And then some chorus, distortion, and OTT. And then at the post, I've got a frequency shifter, bringing that down a little bit, some disperser, some OTT, low cut, clipping, and then obviously a maimed spectrally layer for the width. And both of these are being pitched up just a little bit. This one was frequency shifted up before I consolidated it, but this is just using the Vital pitch bend. And going into the melodics of this section, obviously there's the vocal chop, but there's this really cool fill. Stock Ableton marimba. It's this chaos saw lead with a tiny bit of pitch envelope, and that's really it for that. Just, you know, Haas and clipping and EQing to make it wider. And then the vocal to keep things nice and consistent. I also really like to take just a very subtle saw wave pitching up to build up a little bit of tension. And then towards the end of this drop, there's not much going on here. So I've got this jam from my friend. The person that this actually collab with sent that over. Little lead fill, and then resampled from the main stab. I think I just stretched this on the tones mode and found a cool section. There's also a similar thing going on here. Stretched very high on the tones mode. That is pretty much all going on in this project. I'm going to be finishing this ID soon. That's going to be releasing on the project I'm working on. But there you go.